There he is. Martin is back.
Yep. Just trying to get my audio working here.
Seems to be.
I know I'm on speakerphone. I'd rather use my earphones. For some reason, they're not connecting.
Do we have a quorum?
Otherwise, you'll hear puppies barking and stuff.
Ah.
We have quorum.
What is quorum, 4 or 3?
3.
Then we have a quorum.
We need some members. That usually is most effectively achieved by you guys talking to your people.
So,
How many are we short?
Pardon me?
How many more do we need?
You are allowed 7.
and we've had
We need 3 more.
David Rynch, Louise, and Dennis have all stepped down. That's correct, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Hmm.
Michael will rally the troops. We can count on him. All right. Well, since we do have a quorum, and everyone is here, I'd like to call the meeting to order then. First item of business is approval of tonight's agenda. And there was a late item that came in. Everyone received that?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So given that, do I have a motion?
I might need to add something. Did I include elections tonight?
No, you didn't.
No.
I'd like to add 2 elections, please. Or we could defer to next meeting.
In the hopes that we have a larger contingent.
Let's do that.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
I like that idea.
Well, you're going to be acclaimed anyway, Drew.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be up for acclamation.
Oh, dear.
Let's wait till he misses a meeting.
That's what you usually do. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda with late items? Kirsty, second. Michael, all in favor? It's carried.
Have a majority anyway when you have a mover and a seconder.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And do I then also have a motion to adopt the minutes from the October 21st, 2020 meeting?
I would do it, but I haven't read.
Okay. Okay.
I'll move it then.
Michael?
I'll move it then.
Michael, second.
Well, I might as well.
Thanks, Kirsty. All in favor? That's carried. I was getting a weird echo there. All right, moving on. I don't think we have anyone from the public joining us tonight. All right, then moving on to the council referrals. So this first referral is the one that has been amended. Is that correct? Are we dealing with the later version of that? Is that correct, Jen? I'm asking Jennifer because.
All right, Jennifer, you just unmute.
Or Daniel.
What was the question?
I'm trying to understand whether the original council referral is the one we should be looking at, or we should be looking at the amendment that came out today.
So the council referral is the same. The only difference is, so one of the documents that you received today was the report that went to council, and that's just so that you had everything all together. That has not changed.
Okay.
The other two documents are new. One is a letter from the applicant that we just received, and the other is sort of a response to that letter in terms of what then, in light of that letter, are we going to be discussing for this agenda item today.
Okay.
Two are completely new, and the other one is unchanged.
All right. Do you want to guide us through this then, Jennifer?
Sure. So I'm going to follow the referral letter, which is the one dated January 20th and is from me to the commission for the discussion. Should I share my screen with the letter? Or are you all comfortable looking at it on the side?
I don't know if you share your screen, that'd be great.
Okay. Okay, so you should be seeing that now as a Word file.
Right.
Okay, so this is basically a referral that has come from the council to this advisory planning commission. And it's may seem a little strange because it originally was coming as a rezoning application, this RZ01 2020, and has subsequently shifted to a larger land use bylaw amendment than a typical rezoning would be. So in this case, the municipality is considering changes to the land use bylaw that would amend it to remove the prohibition on the sale of cannabis as a permitted retail use. So that prohibition was discussed back in 2018. And now we have an applicant who's been operating under a temporary use permit on the island for retail cannabis use. And they have now applied for a rezoning since their temporary use permit will be coming to a close soon. So then after sending that out to other committees, as you'll see in the report that was sent to council for the first reading, the other committees recommended that rather than rezoning the particular area that the applicant was in there in the Cove to allow for that continued use as a rezone, instead to simply remove the prohibition. And what that would do is it would allow retail cannabis use in other retail locations. So it's still rather limiting in terms of the entire island, but it means that it would be treated similarly to other retail uses, with the exception that a cannabis location must get a license for operation through the province, and the province comes to the Muni for to provide kind of their okay for that license. So we do have that check still for each location. Each one would need a license. However, the new letter that has come in from the applicant was basically making the case that a policy should be adopted by council prior to removing that prohibition that would guide council in making the decisions for approval or not of any particular license, that would be best practice. So that's sort of what they've done in the letter, and they've included their recommendations for a cannabis policy. In light of that, staff has met to discuss this and has suggested, based on what they've recommended and kind of best practices, that we would adopt potentially a cannabis policy that would have the following components. So I've listed them here because based on the short amount of time, we couldn't actually draft a policy, but we can let you know what we might be thinking about as staff. So it would include these three parts. One would be a vision statement for the policy, which is a pretty standard thing for any policy. And in this case, this vision statement would be discussing the balance needed between supporting economic development on the island through retail cannabis use as a business, but also by considering maintaining neighborhood character and listening to the community and what they want to see. Then the second part would be outlining the notification process that's required by law. So this wouldn't be anything new, but it would just put all the information in one place. And that notification is covered by provincial law. The third part would be a list of considerations that council might take into account in any particular application, just so that it's written out there, and that those considerations could include proximity to sensitive areas such as schools or parks or any kind of sensitive areas that would be identified, support as expressed by local neighbors, the degree of visibility or impact on neighborhood character, and then also its relationship to other retail cannabis stores in terms of distance. So then what we're asking from the APC is statements of the degree of support that the commission would have for these different options. So the first one being just a simple rezoning application for the individual operator in place. The second would be a cannabis policy as we've described. The third would be this bylaw, which allows for the removal of the prohibition for retail cannabis use. And then any comments on that actual removal, and then any alternate approaches that you might want to suggest. So those are kind of our guiding questions for the discussion.
Janice, my recollection with respect to the first point, does the APC support a rezoning application? Did we not recommend not doing a rezoning and rather going the route of changing the land use bylaw?
That's correct. So you've already seen this information, and you were among the committees that recommended rather than rezoning that one place to put in this rather broad prohibition. But I'm just bringing it up again so that we have clarity in the case that the larger prohibition either it doesn't have sufficient support or whatever, to know, would you support each one of those things individually? And then we can take that additional information back to council, or there's always a chance you might change your minds. So
Right.
just
No.
checking in. Yeah.
Are there other, within a land use bylaw, do we have other examples of policy statements that would be analogous to this?
So we did just do our, we updated the green building policy, and it's kind of similar, where we give a vision for, this is basically for proposals for development projects that would like to rezone for increased density and are offering some kind of a environmentally friendly design above and beyond code requirements. What the vision would be for that, what council might consider. So it's sort of similar, it's parallel in its approach. And this is just a one-pager document.
So this, Drew, would be like specifically, wouldn't be in the land use bylaw. It would be a council policy that would say, you know, when we get a referral from the province under the Cannabis Control and Licensing Act, this is what we do with that application. So it lays out.
Daniel, do we have that for liquor stores?
We don't get referrals from the province on liquor stores.
So they just come to you and you say, but they have to get licenses.
They have to get licenses. Maybe it's more that the province isn't issuing new licenses now, and so is not referring them.
So what?
Yeah.
So what happens if somebody else wants to sell liquor on Bowen? They have to get a license from the province.
Yes.
And then they have to apply to you for zoning to sell.
They would be zoned anywhere that's a retail zone.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where we got to last time we discussed this. Was a recognition that it was already true for liquor stores, right? They're just lumped in under retail sales, where cannabis was not.
I'm a little mystified by the letter from the owner operators.
Uh-huh.
I'm a cynic. It's because they don't want competition.
Yeah, actually, that's I didn't want to say that publicly, but I don't disagree. I mean, I'm not in favor of policies that don't serve a purpose, if I could just put it that way. And I have to believe that council will be able to decide. Well, maybe Jennifer and Daniel can help me on this. Maybe if somebody wants to open another cannabis store, say next to the Barcelona or something like that, because that's retail, they'd just be allowed to do that, right? They wouldn't need a license from the muni if they had all their provincial paperwork in order. Is that correct?
So they would still have to. Well, go ahead.
Sorry, what they would need is as part of the provincial license, they refer it to council.
Okay.
Council has to do a step of giving notice. So it can be by receiving written comments, we would advertise for notice, or it could be by doing a public hearing and then make a recommendation. So council could say yes or no to it in that location. So the goal of the policy is essentially trying to guide council, like when an application comes in, it says, okay, we give notice, we don't do a public hearing, but we give written notice to people within 100 meters or something. So we've defined what's a fair process for that.
Okay, well then I look at the list under paragraph 3 of your suggested policy. Many of those things are already covered by existing planning policies and legislation, right? Proximity, neighborhood support.
None of that is sort of defined, like it specifies in the act that we need to notify people.
Right.
Right. So it sort of implies then that like if people are opposed, council would say no.
Right.
But the goal of the policy would be kind of to give some and not give concrete numbers. Like some communities have policies that say, it can't be within 300 meters of a school or within so many meters of a park. Or what, so many meters of another cannabis store. And so I don't think we're not aiming for a policy that would do that would have concrete numbers, but it would just be saying council in their determination and response would be considering these factors.
Okay, so when the province issues a license, does it say that you cannot be within a certain distance from a school or a
They
nunnery
issue
or
a
whatever?
license for a specific storefront.
They
Like
do.
so Happy Isle is licensed for that exact location. Like their license has the floor plan of the building and it's like they're in this spot.
Has their application been vetted for some of these things, proximity to schools and so on?
When they applied and they got their temporary use permit, when they applied for their temporary use permit, we did the required notice under the act at the same time. So we actually advertised for both things. And we said, we're considering a temporary use permit and a cannabis license or referral from the province. Part of our initial discussions with them was about, preferred location and desire, should it be more visible or less visible? Yeah.
Okay.
I can't imagine that policy that's this vague can add anything to a decision process when it would be just easy enough to just refer. It's going to get referred to council. How can council not think, they would go through these 4 things and think about them? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me to add words into a document that are common sense.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines. I think the point of a good policy is, number one, it gives the staff guidance on how to prepare their report and recommendation. And number 2, it gives the public information on or anybody, an applicant, information on what they might have to deal with in connection with their application. And maybe a policy can be crafted that does both these things, but it seems to me like the province has got most of that covered, and the existing land use bylaw, including the amendment that we had supported, would also do that. So I don't know. I mean, if somebody has to have a policy, I don't think it hurts, but.
So further to that, the Happy Isle letter seems to be listing issues that were asked of them in their application. So for the sake of consistency, it would make sense to make those same requirements applicable to future applicants.
Okay. Well, in terms of my first goal of a policy, Jennifer, Daniel, would it help staff to have this policy or a policy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the help for staff is kind of even if we sort of outline what notification would take place, then it's not like trying to decide for each one, because the act gives 4 options for local governments to consider. So if we had a policy that said, okay, we're going to give notice to people within this far and give them this much notice in advance of it coming to council, then it's set and we don't need to go to council each referral and say, how would you like to do this? Because we'll say we gave notice according to the policy. One of the options they give is by holding a referendum. So we would say, we're not going to hold a referendum, we're going to give notice.
would you're proposing then to actually build some of those metrics into the policy? It's not
Yeah.
going to be some kind of broad motherhood statement. It's going to say it's X number of meters between one retail cannabis store and another one.
No,
there's-
sorry, for the meters would be, number 2, the notification process. We'd probably build it in and say it's similar to like our variance permit or a temporary use permit. So it's like if you're within 100 meters, you get a letter and we post it in the paper for 2 weeks or something before we bring it to council.
rather than having a policy that says you cannot have a cannabis store within 600 meters of another cannabis store.
Yeah, and then number 3 would be the vaguer ones and say these are things that council will consider in considering the application, but not give definitive distances, but just say these are things we're considering or council will consider.
And you nevertheless think that there's value in that.
I think the value in that is, in part, it's like if an application comes before council that council does not want to approve. I think having a policy and rationale to reject it helps.
It also has the reverse effect in that by something not being listed, it's stating that that is not an item that's to be considered as well.
Yeah.
Right? So it does also have that effect.
And this whole business is a new business and it's going to continue to change over the next decade. And do we want to, you're not likely to have, 20 cannabis applications because the BC government isn't going to hand them out. So is this just killing a gnat with a sledgehammer? And we don't really know how everything's going to unfold.
Although I am coming around to the idea that the proof might be in the pudding. I mean, it's hard to say yes or no to a policy without having a specific policy to review and determine whether or not it has a use. The one thing that mystifies me a little bit is the distance to other retail cannabis stores. Why would you want to keep them apart? It seems to me that it might make more sense to have them next door to each other especially if you do want to keep them away from schools and parks and convents.
On an island, if you can get them far enough apart, you can only have one. Right?
Well, Kirsty's already made that point, I think.
Right.
I mean, we did discuss that a bit when we were talking as staff, and it's true that there's some advantage sometimes to have things close together, which is one reason why it's also vague. So it doesn't even need to specify that cannabis stores need to be apart, but rather that their relationship in terms of distance would be considered. So whether that's considered an advantage or a disadvantage would be to be determined based on.
Yeah, at least one of my friends
each
visiting the
application.
island thought that it was very conveniently next to a bakery.
I think just to come back to sort of the goal of having a policy, I think the other thing it does is it does help guide applicants. So, the policy says, well, we're going to consider your proximity to sensitive areas, such as, if you're close to schools or playgrounds or preschools or whatever, then people looking for a location to start a business have that in mind, that like, okay, I want to be aware of those factors.
Yeah, that's my second group. But Jennifer also makes a good point. The more policies you have and the more guidelines you have, the more the lawyers have to work with in a negative way down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I suggest we go back to just what we said before, the first recommendation that the APC made, which is to basically just allow it on the island, and then through the process of the BC government and the Bowen Muni.
Yeah, my only problem with that, Kirsty, although that was my initial reaction, I think we're getting the staff and the applicant both suggesting a policy is appropriate. So where I would go is I'd like to look at a policy and see if it does make sense without committing to there being one.
Yeah, I'm tending to agree with Michael on that. If it were solely serving the applicant, then then I don't see any value in it. But if staff are feeling that there is value in it, we should have an opportunity to review what that actually is. So, and since you haven't had time to do that, maybe can we go through the points here and just see? So the first point was, does the APC support a rezoning application for this individual operator? And I think the answer is still no. Can I get a sense of, is that true for you, Michael?
Yes.
Okay. And Martin?
sorry, Drew, just to be clear on that one.
Yes.
So that's like a no because you prefer the island wide.
Yeah, it's a no.
The preference is to
PC2.
amend the land use bylaw to include cannabis sales in other retail sales.
But then I think, and this isn't the direction like we got from council or the feedback at all, but if council came out and said, okay, well, actually, we're not going to do island wide, like that's off the table, would the APC then say, well, no, then we don't want to rezone for this site, or just that's not your preference? Your preference is to make it island wide.
Correct.
Preference, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And, we can cross that bridge if and when we come to it. So this could take a while.
But they have a because they have a problem. Their thing expires in the summer. Jennifer?
I believe it's in August.
Yeah. So anyway, that's
that's part of the reason is that perhaps if we have to develop a cannabis policy and other things, it may slow things down, in which case
Yeah. Well, you don't
back
have
to the
develop-
individual rezoning while the other things happen might be potential direction.
Well, the policy can certainly be developed after the bylaw has been changed, right?
Yeah.
Also the question, they have a temporary use permit. Is there room to extend it?
Yes, it can be renewed with just one council meeting. I think
Right.
you can. So that's always an option. Like if we're in July, if it's, late
Right.
June and it doesn't look happening, then we would be looking to renew their license.
So I think rather than feeling like, we've got to get this solved tonight, I think Michael's earlier point, which is we need to see an actual proposed cannabis policy, that makes sense to me. So I don't think we should worry about the timing. So on item 1, the preference of the APC is to amend the land use bylaw to incorporate cannabis retail sales with other retail sales and not do an individual rezoning for this one applicant. Item 2, does the APC support the creation of a cannabis policy as outlined above? I think the answer is that we would like to see a cannabis policy before we can say yes to that. So we would like to see, we're in support of the creation of a draft at this point.
Okay.
And bylaw 530. Trying to scroll down through your screen share. So the APC support bylaw 530, which is?
That is the bylaw that would remove the prohibition.
Right. Okay. So I guess the answer to that
So
is yes.
that's what you asked for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does the APC have any comments on the proposed wording of section 3.3.12?
So that would be found in the bylaw proposal itself, which I can.
You want to show that, Jen? Can we?
Yeah, I can do that. It's just that we'll lose this other screen.
And
I
that
can read them out.
wording was most of the focus of the council discussion.
Oh,
So we are actively looking to redraft the wording with the intent just being that it would be allowed in any retail, like anywhere there's a retail use, you'd be allowed the cannabis use. But part of what we want to do is then refer it actually to the legal team who wrote the original prohibition and have their input on the wording. So it's the number D on that list.
This is all the rest are the same text. This is the text that changed.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just speak for council here. Council got confused with the words when associated with a permitted. It just seemed rather clumsy. and a rather clumsy way of making the point that it should be allowed in any retail situation.
Okay, so it's just a wording issue, not a,
That's
I mean-
correct. That's correct. And Daniel said, as he just explained to us, yeah, he'd go back and look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it looks like it could have a candy store and it could also sell pot.
I don't think that would be
Not
licensed.
quite, because it's not going to be licensed by the liquor and cannabis regulation, but still, it feels a bit. There's too many uses.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what you need to say when associated with. Why not just say as a permitted principal retail use? Anyway, you'll
Right.
work on that.
Yeah,
Somebody
that's
different
where council was,
connections on
Michael, saying they come up with
Yeah.
ideas just like that. Yeah.
So do we need a motion then on those 5 points?
I've got a motion going, but you're not going to provide comments on, aren't you being asked to provide comments on the wording?
On this wording here, item D in 3312.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I think,
so bullet 4 says, does the APC have any comments on the proposed?
Well, I think the use of the word associated brings an extra concept into the bylaw that's not required.
Okay,
That'd be my comment. So
Which is
delete that.
basically the same comment that the council made. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so we will be changing that, the wording of the deed.
so do we, we just agree that we want it changed too?
yes.
APC supports
Simplifying the wording or?
staff drafting wording. I've got a recommendation on the going here for you. When we get there, you can look at it.
Just a quick question. How long would the extension for the temporary permit be for? If
It would
that were
be,
the-
Generally 6 months.
well, actually, Jennifer, it would be a renewal of the existing license, so it would be the same term.
I ask because the cannabis policy in general, I mean, I think that's going to be complicated in the future with other products being legalized. One of my projects is a psilocybin laboratory in Richmond with the imminent legalization of basically magic mushrooms. So, you know, that's maybe will take more time than the applicants can afford to delay. Is there any way of allowing a rezoning and then rolling in the terms of their rezoning into the policy later on?
How long is their term of the temporary use permit? 3 years?
So I think so. Like, I think our goal is to come back for a second reading from council, and at that time bring a draft policy, and get council feedback on that policy as well, and sort of progress them in parallel. And then it would be a council decision whether, if council wants to proceed with a policy, which council hasn't, we haven't discussed that with council, but it would be council decision to either, bring them along together and, as the applicant suggests, like not adopt a bylaw until the policy is in place, or council could adopt a bylaw and then still just have like a draft policy that's being developed. Or, or they can adopt a policy, but say council's staff still work on revisions to it. Like a policy is just a council can adopt in a meeting. They can say we adopt the policy and then they can replace it with a new policy.
I think the point that Martin is making is that the proponents may feel that the process is overly drawn out, and they're left in this kind of state of limbo, not knowing whether they're going to get a rezoning or not.
Well, they should have been careful
Did I-
what they asked for.
Yeah,
Or
right.
did I just hear that the extension would be 3 months?
3
for
years.
the 3 years.
years.
Okay. Well, okay, 3 years is.
They should give
Significant.
enough time to get them to change their business model and start selling magic mushrooms too.
Yeah, but then the fall policies would have to fall in line, or the
Yeah.
zoning would have to fall in
Right.
line as well. So.
Yeah. Are you okay with that approach, Martin?
I think, yeah, given that it's 3 years, probably, yeah, it would make sense I agree.
Okay.
The last bullet is, does the APC suggest an alternate approach?
What I just suggest is that we just change the land use bylaw and policies will unfold as necessary. But
Yeah, I'm not sure that the policy is a precondition to amending the land use bylaw at all. I mean, in terms of the happy isle, they already have their permits and their business. So policy ought not to be affecting them at all. It's new people that will need the policy, right? So I'm not sure that you necessarily need to hold up the amendment to the bylaw pending the policy.
yeah, that's what I'd like to suggest as an alternate approach, I guess, is just prove the bylaw and roll on.
Yeah, not ask them to go through a rezoning in the future,
Yeah.
right?
So Daniel, are you uncomfortable with having the land use bylaw amended without having a policy in place?
I guess I'm more just optimistic that we can do the policy in that same time.
Well, then our alternate approach is in the event that the policy is not cooked in time, we'd recommend that the bylaw be amended anyway.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that gives staff and council until August to make it so. So,
Okay, you want to see what I've got?
yes, please.
This is sec. It's fun to have your words read back to you. That's not what I said. You're crazy.
You could even share your screen and then you don't have to read them back to us. There we go. The Advisory Boards Commission provide the following comments regarding rezoning application. APC supports rezoning. I don't know that we said that we did support rezoning the Dorman Road.
So was it that you don't, I thought I captured Daniel clarifying that you're not like objecting to Happy Isle having.
Yeah, I think the preferred wording is something like supports rezoning in the event that the definition of retail use
Is not amended, yeah.
And I might take out the words island-wide. That's a little bit confusing because once you've amended, the land use bylaw is by definition island-wide.
Right.
But otherwise it makes it sound like I'd be able to open a store in my neighborhood.
Which is a frightening.
It's the West Siders.
Oh.
Never know about them.
Well,
That looks good.
The
One we're okay with?
Yeah.
The APC recommends that council direct staff to provide a draft cannabis policy for review.
A review before providing.
Yeah. That's,
You like efficacy? Anybody got?
I
any
like efficacy.
I love the word, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of a stretch, but.
That's good.
No, it's perfect.
And the APC.
Do you think this council directing staff is overkill? Just say that staff provide.
I think that's fine.
Okay. Does it mean you have to go to a couple more meetings before coming back? Or?
We don't care if staff directs you. But, APC supports bylaw 530. APC supports staff wording of section 3. See, rec-
Rewording?
APC recommends that in the event that the cannabis policy has not been developed in conjunction with land use bylaw, amend the land use amendment.
Good.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is developed in time, or maybe in conjunction covers that, but yeah, land.
What am I doing?
No, maybe in conjunction's right. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe put the word still in front of proceed, or
Yeah.
proceed in any event, or
Let's use in any event again.
what did you say that already in there?
How about
Please.
the land use process will proceed,
Should proceed.
should proceed, yes.
Step in there.
I was gonna say shall, but it seemed too strong, you know?
I like shall.
Good,
Sure, why not?
good,
Government.
yeah, all right.
Spiffing it up with policy numbers and dates. But
All right,
Good wording.
yes. Any more discussion?
No, I think we in the very first point, didn't we miss out a not, or
APC supports rezoning.
it doesn't make sense. Sports in
Sales,
the event that the definition is not amended to include salary.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Whoops.
right,
Okay.
now we're cooking. There are no double negatives either. All right, do I have a mover?
Kirsty,
Kirsty, sorry, I can't maybe see everybody. A second? Did I see your hand there, Martin?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor? It's carried. All right, thanks, everybody. Moving on to the second item, which is the proposed housekeeping land use bylaw amendments. And this would be Daniel, I would mention. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
Drew, I'll just start.
Yeah.
Does that show up okay?
Yep, it's good.
So this is a project that we've come to the APC a number of times for, and you've seen a draft bylaw for. And so what happened December 14th, we brought that draft bylaw 528 to council, where it received first reading and was referred to the Islands Trust, to the Advisory Planning Commission, and to a public open house. So this is now another kick at it for the APC if there's interest. So I'll just talk you through the presentation that I gave to council, outlining some of the changes that are proposed in the bylaw. And most of these we've talked about before at this committee, but I'll just go over them again. So one was sort of clarifying how we treat what are known as shed roofs in our land use bylaw, and so treating them the same as a pitched roof. So some jurisdictions treat a shed roof, they measure it to the highest point of the shed roof, they treat it like a flat roof. And instead we're proposing to clarify that we'll treat it as a pitched roof, where we take an average height of the roof.
Are these the actual drawings that will go into the bylaw?
No.
Okay.
This is what I made in PowerPoint for council.
Okay, it's the question I have. So the question I would have with this drawing is, on the left, it says pitched roof brackets with ceiling.
Yeah.
The drawing shows a ceiling, I think, in both conditions, but the shed roof is not shown with the ceiling. Does the ceiling matter with the shed roof, or?
I think it would, because so for our bylaw right now, like a pitched roof, if it has a ceiling, we measure from the ceiling to the peak, and if it doesn't have a ceiling, we take a height above the top floor. So I think we say it's 8 feet above the top floor, and then you go up, like if you have a vaulted ceiling, and we would do the same for a shed roof.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted for the diagram to have a ceiling to show we're measuring from some point to the top.
Right.
But yes, on my list is still like our current land use bylaw has a series of diagrams, and on my list is to update those diagrams.
That would be good.
Yeah. Just is always about number 7 on my to-do list. The next thing looking at is then still in terms of height, it's so where we're starting grade from. And so our current definition essentially you take each point where the 2 exterior walls touch the ground, and you take that point. And what we find is that it's quite easy for people to manipulate the grade and change what we consider to be the bottom of the building. So in this case, I have these 2 buildings, and the one with just the 4 square corners, we would calculate as having a grade of 7.5 as a building grade from the 4 corners. But if you add these little 4 points on the top side of the building, suddenly it's 15 meters in elevation instead of 7.5. So you can have a much taller building with just little changes to it. And instead we want to move to something similar to West Vancouver, where they take the elevation of a wall section as essentially as a percentage of the length of the building. So in theory, then each of the 2 examples would have the same grade, and we treat them the same as for purpose of where the grade is. So we think it's a more complicated step, but it's sort of fairer, more fair. And then the next one we're looking at doing is changing the lot coverage. So right now our bylaw talks about the horizontal footprint of all buildings and structures. And what this means is that in essence, we're not counting things that project out from a building. And we would like to instead cover, to measure the amount of lot that's covered by buildings and structures. So we would include the projections in the lot coverage.
So that's decks or just bay windows?
Yeah, it would be decks if they're over 2 feet high, which we cover now. If they have posts, they're covered. Whereas if you project like a balcony, it's not included.
Right.
So we would like to just take, when you look at a site plan and you see things that are over 2 feet high, that's included in the lot coverage. This next one is still sort of a work in progress, but this is our lot line discussion. And in particular, the front lot line being the shortest lot line common to the lot and a highway. And I've given these examples to you before, but in terms of places where our lot line definitions end up with strange things. So this is a classic one where there's an undeveloped road right of way. If you're in like Scarborough or Miller or Eagle Cliff, even, there's like undeveloped road right of ways that if that's your shortest lot line, that gets considered your front lot line. Yeah. Another example, when you end up with many lot lines fronting a road, and this is more common in a newer subdivision where the road sort of follows around the side of a property, and it ends up with multiple little lines that are all touching the road and the lot, and then we end up having to measure which one's the shortest line, and that becomes the front.
So what are you trying to do to this then?
So what we've put in the bylaw right now is essentially what's done in several of the islands. So like Salt Spring and Galliano have this approach where they say it's the shortest that's greater than 20 meters would be considered the front lot line. So it's trying to capture those little short segments and say, okay, it has to be of some length. It still doesn't, I don't think it's a perfect solution. I think it's better, but I don't think it's great. But I also haven't seen another example that would solve this. And then the other consideration being that, many places on Bowen have built under the current way. And if we look at another approach, then we'll end up with many, many houses that are within setback. So the other approach would just be to say if it's any line that touches the highway becomes a front lot line, but then we'd have many houses that are now within setbacks and have to worry about existing non-conforming, and they would need variances for any changes and all of that. Yeah.
With the kind of odd shaped lots on Bowen and different size lots and so on, this becomes a challenge, right?
Yeah, like I know, Drew, you just had a project where it impacted
Yeah, in Eagle Cliff, where the property was fronting on two roads, and then there was one little jog in one of those two property lines, and that became the front lot line. Where this becomes an issue is the front lot line, the setback is 7.5 meters, where the others is 3 meters, and suddenly you have a big piece of the property which becomes unbuildable, possibly in a place where you didn't really want that to occur.
Yeah.
So Drew, do you have any other suggestions, having worked in a whole bunch of different municipalities? Or have you talked to Daniel about it?
I don't. It's a challenge everywhere. Bowen has particularly odd shaped lots, and that's where it gets tricky. I mean, I remember looking a couple of years ago at a property in an undeveloped property in Eagle Cliff, and there's a long curving road that goes up into the area, and that was all determined to be front yard. And when you took that but the property wasn't very deep, but when you took the front yard and the rear yard out, there was a postage stamp left that you could build in. So, there's all kinds of issues that arise out of this. And I don't know. I can see that this would be an improvement, but it is, Daniel says, it's not perfect.
Well, can you have some, this probably doesn't work at all, but some additional wording as if the lot is peculiarly shaped, then discussions will be had or something, like, because otherwise you're just going to have variances all the time, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which
I feel like I saw one place where essentially it was like, the building inspector will assign, which is the front lot line.
I have experience with that. It's very messy.
Yeah.
In London and the UK, it's like that, and it's just terrible. It becomes an argument on every project between the municipality, the developers, the owners.
Yeah.
People make purchasing decisions based on assumptions that don't work out. It's potentially messy. It's better to have it defined, even if it's defined the way it is right now, I think.
I agree it's an improvement. And I mean, the difficulty here is what we really want is we want something that has a kind of practicality aspect to it. And,
yeah.
And I think, but I don't know how you would draft something that said that this definition does not apply if it creates an unreasonable restriction on development of the lot. But that's the notion anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it also ends up affecting neighbors too. Like neighbors will get upset if they thought that was the property's rear yard and they're going to be 7.5, but instead their front somewhere, so their rear somewhere. So that's just a side and it's just 3 meters. Yeah, we get complaints on that side of it too.
Yeah. Well, none of this is a reason not to support at least the improvement anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really that, we know it when we see it.
Mm-hmm.
But that probably doesn't work as a bylaw, right? Sounds like Martin's problem.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and every time I see the examples where it's like, the building inspector's assigning it or the planner's assigning it, that sounds bad because then it just leads to, they're going to ask me and then they'll ask Greg and they get a different answer, or then we're having to record it all somewhere and saying this is this front yard because I have spoken. Yeah, I don't really want to go that way.
Yeah, it would be a huge project to basically draw it up on the map for every property.
Yeah. So the next one is then going into some of our definitions. So we have this: domestic agriculture is allowed as a principal use in most of our like our SR2 zones, so the denser areas, compared with rural lots are allowed just agriculture, which is much broader. But This one means the growing or rearing of any agricultural product for the personal use of the occupant of the lot. And we've always treated this as an accessory use. So we've said, well, there needs to be a dwelling on the property for you to do this, because there needs to be an occupant of the lot. And so we're proposing to move it to be an accessory use instead of a principal use, and to make that clearer for everyone.
So you can't have a farm if you don't live there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you're in somewhere that just allows domestic agriculture and not agriculture. So these ones already, like, you wouldn't be allowed to sell it if it's domestic agriculture use, but not agriculture. You're not allowed to sell what's there.
It's like you're gonna have chickens in your yard, for your, so you can have the eggs. It's really, it's implied in the way it was written originally that it is an accessory use, and then it doesn't show up as an accessory use. So I mean, it's just kind of states what it really meant to say.
Yeah. And this one's triggered some conversation with councillors about, well, maybe we should be looking at the domestic agriculture definition, and maybe people should be able to sell, vegetable products. But I've said that seems like that's like a bigger discussion I would like to have island-wide, rather than having it in a big housekeeping bylaw as like just one little change. And then
food resiliency is a big topic right now on the island, and covers more than just land use planning. But this strikes me as doing the job right now anyway.
Yeah.
So the next one is looking at our definition for what is a water course. So this is our current definition, where it talks about having a water course is a natural or man-made depression with well-defined banks, certain depth below the land, and it drains a certain amount of land. It doesn't include a constructed ditch. And a constructed ditch is one, obviously it's a constructed ditch, but it doesn't flow into a water course is sort of the key piece of what makes it a constructed ditch. And so therefore not a water course. And this comes especially relevant if it's under provincial riparian area protection regulation, which has a stream definition. So if it's a stream under the riparian area protection regulations, it's like the provincial regulations and provincial assessments and stuff to do development apply. And so in their definition, a stream is a water course, whether or not it usually contains water, and anything that's connected by surface flow to a water course. So a ditch, a spring, a wetland. So often we'll end up in discussions with people who have what they consider to be a ditch next to their property, but if it's connected by surface flow to a stream or to a fish-bearing stream, it is still a water course, and it still is RAR applicable.
It's the fish-bearing part that's missing from that, but that's the important part.
Yeah.
The riparian area, because if you can demonstrate that the water course, whatever it is, the stream, is not fish-bearing, then you don't have to establish a SPIA around it.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is change the water course definition to just to make it more clear that it would include a ditch if it's connected by surface flow.
Where does this definition
Apply.
right? Is this has to do with setbacks, you mean?
This has to do with setbacks from water course and what needs a development permit. So for our watershed aquifer stream protection, the WASP development permit area.
So it could be a ditch, and you could have to have a setback from it.
Yeah. So I think it's in Tunstall Bay. They have ditches that flow into Explosives Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are captured by RAR, they're tributary to a fish-bearing stream. And so they're captured even though people will look at them and say, well, no, it's a ditch. I don't need to follow these steps.
Uh-huh.
So if it doesn't go, if the ditch went to water that didn't go to a fish-bearing stream, or it went to a non-fish-bearing stream, then all of this doesn't matter?
Yeah, it doesn't apply. You
Yeah,
might-
then it doesn't apply, or if it's like a ditch that, yeah, percolates into the ground, like it never actually reaches something.
Yeah, I was wondering where the water would go.
Like it would just, yeah, like if it was a fairly flat ditch with not much runoff going into it, it just percolates down. Where you'd end up with a little pond that, yeah, that it percolates into the ground versus it can actually flow above ground into a stream.
But like drainage water that flows into the ocean, that's, you don't
Yeah.
have to, that is not included. You don't have to develop a stream side protection area around
Yeah.
it. So you're really trying to get the wording here so it's more consistent with the riparian area regulations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which makes sense.
And after, it's not in this presentation, it's not in the bylaw right now, but after my council presentation and some questions, I think I'm going to change, it's on here, a wetland. So our land use bylaw has a wetland definition, and so does the riparian area protection regulation. And I don't remember what they are, but they're similar, but they're not the same. And I'm going to change our definition just to be the same as the riparian area wetland definition, and then
They should be identical, I
more
think.
consistent. Yeah. So that's the extent of what I presented to council. So I just have here the recommendation that's in the agenda. Stop there.
So,
And that recommendation is that the APC provide the following comments regarding the proposed housekeeping amendments to the land use. Okay. Did anyone have any comments on the proposed changes, or?
no, thumbs up. Is that a comment?
That's a comment, sure. Michael's 2 thumbs up. Kirsty?
I'm okay, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like, yeah. Martin is also?
All right.
Right. So we then, have you got a motion for us there, Steph? Motion to approve Daniel's changes.
So then we just be the advisory planning commission support
Yes,
proposed.
the proposed amendments to the land use bylaw.
Yeah. Although you did suggest some further changes as we went along. I don't know if we need to capture that concept, but
I think you're already doing those. Is that correct? Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Steph, you're just on mute, or are you talking to someone else?
Okay.
see you
that's
talking.
a while to tell me that. I've been blabbing away as presented and amended.
Should we amend something?
We didn't amend anything.
I need little notes that
no,
Daniel.
it wasn't so much that Daniel did amendments. He said there's some areas that require further work.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we capture that. I don't want to restrict him
Trust
from
him.
making the changes because we approved of what we saw on the screen today.
I think support's a good word.
Yeah. I think I'm happy with that.
Good.
All right, do I have a motion then? Do I have a mover? Michael, second. Martin, all in favor? It's carried. All right. We're not going to do elections tonight. There was a big one in America. That's all we need.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, and I got Lady Gaga signed up to sing.
Really? Right. Then let's see, our next meeting is currently scheduled for February 17th, 7 o'clock. Is everyone good meeting at this time now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And was I right? We have 3 vacancies. Is that what I heard earlier?
Yeah.
That's correct.
So we'll advertise. It just tends to be, word of mouth tends to be more effective than.
Okay. Tell people how much fun this is.
Fun.
Yeah.
And
It's all the perks we get.
Yeah. So Steph,
Well-
and then there is someone to go through you or go direct?
Go through me. I'm not, council's the decision-making body, but I would be the one that gets the information to council.
Okay.
All right. Well, hopefully we will
Thank you, guys.
see some new faces, and a motion to adjourn. Michael, Christy, everyone wants to adjourn. All right. That's
Okay,
great. Thanks, everybody. And we'll
Thank
see
you.
all.
Thank you.
Good night, folks.
Happy New
Good night.
Year, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes,
Happy New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
Good night.
Yeah, good night.